My name is Jordan Varghese. Today is May 2nd. The time is 3:16, and we are at St. John's Northwestern Military Academy. I'm interviewing veteran Edmund Mies, who was born on February 6, 1925 in Milwaukee, and served in World War II between 1943 to 1946. Edmund Mies was a T5 corporal in the branch of the U.S. Army and served as an amphibious engineer. This interview is sponsored by the Bell Tower Memorial. So, sir, before all of this started, can you tell me a little bit of what you were doing before you entered the service?
I was a high school student, and I was on my final year, and I got my papers for induction. And in evenings, I was an assistant manager at one of our local show houses.
Was there anything that pressured you or motivated you to join the branch of service, or what was your motivation?
Well, I didn't have the motivation to at that time, because I wanted to complete my high school education, and so I was just one semester short. So and I had to go in, and so I wasn't able to finish my high school, and then I didn't have any choice after that.
So when you did arrive, can you tell me a little bit about your early weeks of training and how you adapted to the military life?
It wasn't very difficult. I think the most difficult portion of it was the overseas trip from Wisconsin to, actually from Illinois to New Guinea. And we spent 29 days on the water, and had 2 meals a day, and we were issued a little less than a half a gallon of fresh water a day, and had real tight quarters.
Would you say you were an easy fit, or did it take a while to settle in to the military life?
As far as I can recollect, I would say because of all the other people around me and so forth, it didn't take me long to adapt at all. I was very, very willing to do a good job and have a good record.
Can you share an experience of one of the first times that you recollect joining into the military that you remember the most, that was very vivid? Can you share an experience that you remember the most, one of the first experiences you had with the military when you first? We
I was impressed with the organization and coordination that was there, and we weren't treated brutally or uneasily. We were treated very fairly, and we were treated well.
And what do you consider to be your most important contribution during your service?
Well, to do a good job and do as well as I can.
Can you go through some of the achievements that you deem are some of the highest achievements you achieved during your service? In other words,
which number is that, Ruth?
Which are some of your, what you would say, your greatest achievements that you achieved during your time?
Well, we were so busy from morning to night, and then we had so much training, and we were specialized in training. We didn't have much time to tell how we were treated, but we were treated very well. And
can you give me some of the different medals and service awards you achieved and that you remember?
Well, when we were in the service, we were assigned to a particular craft, you know, and being an engineer, and with the additional training, all the additional training we had, then I didn't have time. But the achievement was to be an engineer on this boat, and to be able to learn all the facts that had to go with it, you know. We had to learn navigation, we had to learn communications, we had to learn the operation of the craft and the maintenance of the craft, and so forth. And so it took our time, and again, as I say, the instructors were very knowledgeable and very accepting of our answers and our help, and the way we responded to the training.
What was daily life like being an amphibious engineer?
What was the daily life?
Yes. What would you do on a daily basis?
Well, we were very busy. First of all, when you're awake, and then you have to check everything on your craft, and you had some time for recreation where we could play cards, or if you wanted to smoke or so forth, but we were in such a position that we were on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that we had to respond in that manner. So we didn't have much time for really recreation or so forth, but on shore, when we had a chance for that, then we had some sports.
And while you were on the craft, would you say it was very tedious, or can you explain what it was like being on the craft and some of the hardships that you encountered?
Well, it wasn't it depended what type. If you were on a routine mission, then you had time to relax. And if you were carrying troops or you were carrying personnel, no, you had to be alert at all times, and you had to be available, and you had to know what you were doing.
And overall, in terms of hardships, which were the ones that stand out the most that you had to endure?
A hardship?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the way our units were organized, we really didn't have to incur, hardships of lack of food or lack of this or lack of that or lack of information. We were always well informed, and so we really felt comfortable. So some of the hardships is that you're gone from home and so forth, that you have to live with it and then make the best of it. But if you have good friends and you have a good crew, it really, the day goes really fast.
And in terms of friendships that you made during your time during the service, can you give me some examples of just friends you made during the service?
Well, when I was sent from Milwaukee to Fort Sheridan, Illinois, I met a young man there immediately that we befriended each other, and we were friendships from that first day on till we got separated. In other words, the war was over and we were both to go home, and after that I even kept in touch with him until he passed away.
And in terms of leadership that you had encountered, were there any strong forms of leadership that just stood out and inspired you to become better?
Well, because of the good training that we had, and the comrades that we had with us, we all had our own responsibilities, and we all had to learn each other's responsibility in case something happened to the person that was called the coxswain that ran the boat, that you could replace him. And if something happened to you, you could replace to you, that the other person could replace you. And so we kept well informed as to how we felt each day. And so as far as leadership, because of the quality and the people I was with, we were all leaders.
Could you maybe like show of a strong leader that you first encountered, perhaps, that just inspired others and you per se?
Well, you know, when you're in a service, you get different things, and we dealt with quite a few different situations. And when you're in a situation and you offered, the way I felt when I was being understood, and where they were going to do something that I asked them to do and so forth, then the leadership was really a shared responsibility on our craft. We had 5 people in there.
And on the flip side, were there any forms of bad leadership that you encountered that really set the tone for a negative environment that you recall on?
For a negative environment?
Yeah, negative. So any leadership that you just found to be negative that's on the flip side of good?
I don't really, it's been a long time, but I don't recollect any such experience.
It says listed here you received the Good Conduct Award and the World War II Victory Medal as well as the Asiatic Pacific Medal. Could you expound more on those specific awards and how it made you feel to receive them?
Well, I belonged to the 3rd Brigade, and this was a special, the 593rd Engineers and Specialist Brigade, and we were in what we call the 3rd Brigade, and it was developed especially for transporting shore-to-shore troops, supplies. Let's say an airplane went down and we had to go out and rescue the pilot if possible, or if there was a bomber that fell short of the shoreline and we had to get the personnel out. We were sent on that mission, and we were taking one special incident was there was a group of young inductees or soldiers that were on our craft that were very inexperienced. They didn't even know how to take their rifle apart. So we helped them with that, and we encouraged them how to respond when they went ashore and so forth, and that made us feel better too. Shared our cigarettes with them.
Yeah, was this a regular occurrence where there would be perhaps a squad of new inductees that didn't have experience? Would you, on a regular basis, train these people?
Would you clarify a little further?
So you mentioned how you had to train these new inductees.
Yes.
Was this a regular occurrence, or was this
No,
isolated?
it was very probably once or twice that we had experienced that. We just had a feeling for these fellows that they just came right out of basic training and shipped overseas and were going right into combat.
Do you feel that contributed to you receiving the Good Conduct Award?
Well, it would be part of it. And the good part of my conduct was is I didn't smoke, I didn't drink, and I didn't consort with any women.
And you mentioned also before how you would go out to rescue pilots that may have been stranded.
Yes.
Could you maybe expound more on how that made you feel, just knowing that you're doing that?
That was a responsibility of being alert on the 24-hour a day, 7 hours, the whole. And I didn't have thank you, but I didn't have the experience of having to rescue a pilot. But one of the bombers went down, the B-10s went down, and it went down in about 25 to 30 feet of water, and the whole crew was trapped in there. But we couldn't rescue them because they couldn't get out. We couldn't get to them. And that's something that I think of many times. But ordinarily, if they were in a little further to shore, or they could have gotten out of that plane somehow, or we could have gotten down there to break the glass or whatever, but we couldn't rescue these 10 people. And that bothered me.
Were these incidents?
That was just one incident, yes, that I can tell you.
Were these incidents a responsibility of amphibious engineers? Was this something amphibious engineers would generally have to
do rescue? If we could rescue them, yes, it was one of our responsibilities.
And what were the other responsibilities of amphibious engineers? What else were you capable of and charged of doing?
You have to know the nomenclature of this craft, okay? So there were 2 engineers, and we had had 2 engines, 2 gray marine diesel engines, and if you make a landing and you're going into shore, and you're going close, and you have filters, and if these filters get filled with sand, you have to make sure you can go down. And if we cut one engine, we can clear those and to clean the others, and to keep that complete craft in ship shape. And in other words, what I'm saying is we had to do what we call first and second echelon maintenance, and we were responsible for that. And if anything happened to our craft and it failed because of that, then we had some responsibility that we didn't carry out.
Was the pressure put upon you immense, per se, or was there a lot of pressure put on you because
that was
of this?
A responsibility we know we had, and that's the one we performed. We didn't have to have anyone to tell us that we needed refueling, or whether that, because we did that on a routine basis.
In terms of training for this specific part of your duty, did you receive a lot of training to do this, or was it?
Did we get trained for it?
Yes.
Oh yes, we were trained in Monterey, California. We were trained from one end of that, from the bow to the stern, and everything that the mechanisms and everything we had to know. And we had to, yes, we were well trained. We had no problem with.
Going back to your time in Monterey, would you say that really helped you, or?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yes. Because after we learned all this, we made mock trainings along the shores in California and in Monterey and so forth. And
could you maybe share an experience at Monterey?
Beg your pardon?
Could you maybe explain a experience you had at Monterey that really sticks out?
Well, in Monterey it was where we learned all the complete operation of the craft, and we had a seaman that handled it. Like if we had to tie up to a ship, that he would handle that. The engineer made sure the engines were there, and we had twin 50 caliber machine guns on our stern, and if it became necessary that we had to return gunfire, we had to operate those and be there. And if our the training in Fort Ord and Monterey, what if something happens to that craft? You know what I mean? And you're with an infantry outfit, you can't go on the beach and run over onto another boat. So you become part of the infantry, and part of that force, and work with them until you can be relieved and come back.
Also, in terms of experiences throughout your entire service, which experience can you say really just strikes a nerve and that makes you remember the most?
Mine was more of an experience is that I was in an outfit that I was comfortable with, and I was comfortable with the people that I was with, and I made good friends, and we helped each other and thought of each other as much as we could.
But in terms of experiences, can you just maybe expound on an experience you had, like a specific experience you had while serving that just you really remember vividly?
Yes, we were out on a mission, and as you know, when you're out on the ocean, a storm can come up, and if that storm comes up, that water, you can get breaks as high as 8 to 10 feet high. And you remember, if your craft is in this, that you're in a craft that is built, but it has floating ballasts in them and so forth, that if you can't, you could capsize the boat if you didn't, you could run on one engine, you could do that. And we did that for about 3 or 4 hours in one big storm that we had. And that was a very difficult time. We ran out of fuel. We were between being back to our bases and dropping off a troop. In other words, our mission was complete, but we were back to camp. We were on this vacant, on this craft, and we're running out of fuel. What do you do? And between you and between your camp is unscouted territory. But we were lucky enough that we could beach the boat and wait the storm out. In other words, we took it in and landed and dropped the ramp, and then...
Were there many other perils of the ocean that you faced while on your time on the craft?
Many what?
Perils, so dangers that you encountered while on the ocean. Was it a very dangerous place?
Well, you mean with enemy territory or?
Yes,
well,
and in general.
Anytime you went on a mission from one place to another, you were always in so that you were in. You could say you were in combat. You were ready because, you know, when you make a landing, I don't know if you're going to ask about those, but when you make a landing, you know, you got all this support. You got the big battleships out in the ocean. They're dropping fire on the shore to soften it up, and you're standing by on yours in case you get fire returned. And sometimes when they say it just you just see these things just floating around above your head, and you know, well, you are concerned. So yeah.
What were some of the life lessons you learned from military service?
Well, I guess I've been trying to convey that through this interview, is that when this group was formed, this was not just, these were hand-picked people from what I understand. And so we were together, and the friendships that I experienced, and if something is one time, you know, one of our fellows that can't swim fell off the boat. Well, we threw him a lifesaver, you know, and brought him up and so forth and that. But in friendship, you said, right?
Life lessons. So you really learned the lessons of friendship.
And I can't think of any bad experiences I've had with any of our comrades. They were all 1A.
Would you say there's any other life lessons that you learned throughout the service?
Well,
as friendship.
If you have a job to do it, and do it well.
Yes.
And that's in a nutshell.
Would you say that all these life lessons still apply to your daily life, even today?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. How you treat one another and so forth. Yes, yes.
And could you maybe give an example of how you still apply these life lessons to your daily life still to this day?
How I apply them?
Yes.
Well, with your family, you're empathetic to their problems, and you help them as you can, and you take them through the rough spots, and you respect your family, and you don't abuse them, and so forth.
And do you have any regrets about the military service? Anything at all that you would want to take back, or that you would just reflect on?
Well, after it was all over, no, because I think that the experience was very enlightening and very helpful, and so no, I don't have any regrets of being in the service.
So, as you mentioned at the start, going in, you didn't really have much of a choice, but would you say that if you were to go back then with all this experience, you would still make the same decision?
Would I go there again?
Mm-hmm.
Certainly.
And were there ever any regrets during your service, maybe opportunities that you could have taken that you didn't, that you would go back and take?
Was there any opportunity?
Yes, and maybe opportunities you were given that you maybe declined in your service that you wish you could have gone back and taken?
Well, when you say declined, if they were a request or something that I had to do, I did them without questioning it. And then I don't think that because of the nature of our group that they ever sent us into where anything that we were all in extreme jeopardy.
And going back, so your highest rank was a T5 corporal. Would you say that, how did you get this rank per se? How did you have to work tenuous hours just to achieve this rank? And can you explain how you achieved it?
What again?
Achieved the rank of T5 corporal. Can you maybe explain maybe the hardships you had to endure to achieve such a rank?
Well, I just took it as it came, and just.
And do you ever wish that you could do more? As when you were in the service, do you wish you could have done anything more, or?
In my recollection, because of the standards that we had were so high that I think that what we achieved is we were proud of, and if we could have done more, we would have been willing to do it, you know.
And so, in conclusion, you were very pleased of what you did during your time here. There were no regrets whatsoever.
Well, I was very proud of being part of that the 3rd Brigade.
Would you like to show us anything in this book?
Can I show what?
Would you like to show us anything within this book?
I brought this along, and it was written by one of the officers of our group, and then my company commander. And it's called Beachheads Are Our Business. And when the 593rd went overseas, and we got there, we had A Company, B Company, and C Company. And when we made landings, A Company would support C Company, or C Company would support A, but it was the responsibility of A to carry it out. Now, giving you an example, when we went on our first combat mission in Atapi, New Guinea, A Company went to Atapi, and then B Company went to Hollandia. And New Guinea is split in British and Dutch. So one part went Dutch, and we went part Australian. And most of the troops that we dealt with were Australian.
And it says here, did you ever see or meet MacArthur?
I can tell you an incident about General MacArthur. I have high respect for him because I've read his history and his background and so forth, and he's a native of our state. And one day we were out, and a PBY, that's an airplane that MacArthur had come, and in Borneo on the first day of our landing made a visit to that. He landed. Now the PBY is so that it couldn't get into shore, so some one craft or another craft had to go out and ferry him from his craft to the shore. And there were two of them, and we raced over to try to get to whoever it was to help them get ashore, not knowing it was him, and another one, but I got beat out. And so then he got onto the other craft, but we were close enough that we could see who it was and how, and I remember that the one instance that I'd say that I think the other guy that ran the craft dropped his ramp too soon to get him off, and he had to walk in about 12 inches of water.
Oh.
And I don't know if he appreciated that or not. But then when they got on shore, this story comes to us after the landing. When we got on shore, General MacArthur was with one of his aides, and there was a samurai sword sticking out of the ground. And he asked the general if the general would like that sword, and he said, "Leave it alone." And they left it. Later on, they found out that it was a booby trap.
Oh.
And that kind of raised the hair on the back of my head. And when MacArthur left, and then the other boat ferried him back, but I could wave to him and he waved back. And that's as much as I got to him.
That's very interesting. And would you, even though you didn't meet him face to face, would you still consider him to be an example of very strong leadership out of the background knowledge you had about him?
From the background that would I consider him as a great leader? I certainly would, yes.
Could you explain maybe why that you respected
Why?
MacArthur?
Because, well, I'm basing this on my own experiences, okay? But how well all of our landings, and then we got 74 combat landings contributed to the 3rd Brigade. And all of our landings were well coordinated, and I think that he had one thing in mind, is to have as few casualties as he could. What I'm saying is, when they had the airplanes came and did the bombings ashore, the ships out to sea with the high powered shells shelling the shore, making it clear that we would get that at least get onto the beach, and have a safe landing. And I think that, and from what the feedback that we got from other superior officers, were always well coordinated and very, very accurate. Like the other major landing that I went into was in Borneo, and that was the last Asiatic Pacific landing of. And when we went in there, is my train of thought on that was, but it was so well coordinated and so forth that we had any trouble, because the Japanese, you know what a mine is.
Yes.
And there's land mines, and then there's mines out in the ocean and in a bay. And the harbor of Balikpapan, Borneo, was one of the most well mined. But the minesweepers that went through evidently missed one. Prior to my getting, now you got me back here, but prior to that example, one of our craft hit one of those mines, and we lost that 56-foot craft and 4 people. But what the heartbreaking part of it was, is that was the craft that I was assigned to prior to this landing. They had one additional one, so they broke up some crews. And my very good friend Bern Michaels and I were transferred to another craft, and then the 2 of the newer recruits were transferred to that craft. And when that one went up, we were out in Borneo, and the debris even from the shore, like the palm trees, were out there, and we had twin screws and propellers, and one of our shafts was bent and we couldn't operate, so we were up on shore, and we were in Michaels and I were in the engine room, getting ready to replace the shaft and propeller, and one of our buddies come and told us about that craft. I'll tell you, I froze then. Yes, I did. And that was, now why wasn't I on that boat? I was on another one. See, I was transferred.
That's very, that's
I don't know if you understand, George.
I do understand, sir. And I would like to thank you for all the experiences you shared with me today. And I would like to thank you for all the experiences you shared with me today.
Thank you. I couldn't think of them all.
And in closing, this has been an interview of Edmund Mies regarding his service during World War II. My name is Jordan Varghese. The time is 3:51. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, and most importantly, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
But I'll tell you one thing. I do think of these guys. I had one most wonderful people. We shared, we did everything together, and we were even regimental champions in baseball and softball. Can you imagine? The Japanese had wooden landing craft, and the ramp was a little wider than this, and they were slow, but they had good firearms, you know. And so, well, when you encountered one, you got a 50 caliber against those, you know. You could, and I went out one night with the Navy PT, you know. You'd have to volunteer to be a gunner on there, and we went out for night surveillance because the Japanese like to travel at night. So we went with these PT boats and that, and when one of those Japanese craft wanted to catch up to us, you know, what? And the PT boat just put that chap, then dropped him way back in the background. Came around and shot him out of the water.
From behind. From behind, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Those PT boats were fast, and they ran Pratt and Whitney, you know, aircraft engines. And one of the post-war experiences I had is that I knew that engine on our craft so well. You know what I mean? And the telephone, I'm a telephone company retiree, and one day I was working on a late tour and so forth, and we had a storm and all the power went out. So if the power goes out, the system goes down. And one of the fellas came upstairs and he says, "Oh," he says, we got a new engine here, and I don't even know how to start it, and I've been trying, and nothing works." And he says, "Anybody here know anything about it?" And I said, "Well, I said, what kind of an engine is it, you know?" And I knew some of the old gasoline types, and I knew that Gray Marine from like the back of my hand. So we went down into that engine room where this big Gray Marine diesel, like we had exactly like on our craft. And I was so well trained as to what you do, you know. When you maintain it, you turn off the fuel line. Then you do this, you do that. So I went and I turned on the fuel line, went up, pressed the primer, and he says, "What's that noise?" It was as simple as a little valve that they didn't know about. And really, you don't want to have the fuel line turned on until you need it. See? And I felt like a big shot.
As well you should.
Yeah.
But that doesn't relate to it relates to my Army because that's where I learned it.
You have such a good story.
And General Motors sent, when we were in our training in Orchard, California, on the Gray Marine diesel, they sent experienced engineers. They weren't just mechanics, they were engineers that showed us all the operation of that engine. Now, see, there's we had what we call first, second, third, and fourth echelon. First and second echelon, we were responsible, meaning that the proper running, the cleaning of the sand traps and so forth. But if you had to need a fuel injector or something, that was third and fourth. But we had to know it all though, because in an emergency, you can't call.
You weren't there. Yeah, exactly.
You might have to take the head off and replace the fuel injector, which I know I could do. I can't do it on my car, but.
And you know, I just want to say one thing that he didn't mention. During World War II, our government took over some of those beaches in California to train people like him and other people, sailors probably. They actually took over those beaches. Something that I'm just amazed at that, because I never heard or read that anywhere.
There's a lot we haven't read.
No,
but you know how many soldiers had to learn? How many soldiers had to learn aircraft identification? You know, like with the Japanese Zero and the bombers and so forth. And we had to know all of that, and we used it. But
You can look through
one time we were on the beach and a zero came, one time we were on the beach and a zero came strafing along the beach. And one of the Australians
Those are actual photos.
pulled up his rifle and he shot, and believe it or not, he shot it down.
He was there.
Oh, really?
The zero, boom, light like that.
Well, we're gonna let